Muy buenas noches. Les doy la bienvenida a esta conferencia Mahatma Gandhi, arquitecto de la libertad de India. Mi nombre es Scott Venecia Corral, soy director de Relaciones Internacionales para Sistemas CETYS Universidad y fungiré como presentador moderador de esta conferencia. Primeramente, considero importante dar el contexto de este evento, el porqué de esta conferencia y cómo se relaciona con las iniciativas internacionales de CETYS Universidad. Las iniciativas académicas de CETYS Universidad datan del año 2006 a la fecha. Intercambio de profesorado e intercambio de grupos de alumnos en estancias cortas han sido el énfasis principal de estas iniciativas. Las alianzas de CETYS Universidad con instituciones de educación superior de India se han enfocado en el estado de Tamil Nadu, en el sur de India, así como en Maharashtra, centro y oeste de la India, y en el norte, en la región de Rajasthan. A raíz del convenio de colaboración firmado con Gandhi Research Foundation en mayo de 2008, esta fundación, basada en Jalgaon, en el estado de Maharashtra, dona a nuestra institución una colección inicial de 16 fotografías de la vida de Gandhi. En 2009, CETYS Universidad solicita una donación adicional a Gandhi Research Foundation con la meta de establecer un centro de estudios Gandhi en Baja California, el cual contribuyera a los objetivos de la Gandhi Research Foundation en el noroeste de México y sureste de Estados Unidos. En 2009, CETYS Universidad recibe la segunda donación que incrementa la colección a 113 libros, 16 fotografías en forma impresa, 113 fotografías en forma electrónica y 82 copias de estampillas. Esta colección de 324 artículos son la base para la fundación del Centro de Estudios Gandhi, cuya misión es contribuir a las metas y acciones de Gandhi Research Foundation, promover la difusión de las enseñanzas de Mahatma Gandhi, su filosofía, ejemplo de vida y de liderazgo, así como el entendimiento y práctica de la opción de no violencia para la resolución de conflictos. De dicha misión se desprenden sus metas: promover el estudio de la vida de Mahatma Gandhi, promover la difusión de sus enseñanzas, fomentar el entendimiento de la práctica de no violencia como una opción de resolución de conflictos, contribuir al estudio del liderazgo y filosofía Gandhi y difundir su ejemplo de vida, ideales y acciones. CETYS Universidad y Gandhi Research Foundation firmaron recientemente otro acuerdo de colaboración, lo cual permitirá expandir el ámbito y tipo de actividades que ambas instituciones realicen en el futuro. La colección Gandhi del Centro de Estudios Gandhi se encuentra en la Biblioteca Comunitaria del Campus Ensenada del Sistema CETYS Universidad. A las personas asistentes a esta conferencia se les hace una cordial invitación para visitar dicha biblioteca y la colección mencionada. Tanto las fotos como los libros están a disposición de todos ustedes. La conferencia de esta noche es la primera de dos, las cuales son parte de las iniciativas de colaboración de CETYS Universidad y Gandhi Research Foundation, y buscan celebrar los 155 años del natalicio de esa gran persona, Mahatma Gandhi. La segunda conferencia, favor de agendarla, se llevará a cabo en octubre 2, precisamente la fecha del nacimiento de Gandhi. El evento de esta noche está dividido en tres partes. Primeramente, esta introducción que he hecho yo y la presentación de la conferencista doctora Dharampal, seguido de la conferencia misma que está contemplada para aproximadamente 40 minutos, así como una sección final de preguntas y respuestas. Respecto a ello, y ustedes que se han conectado vía YouTube, podrán mandarnos sus preguntas por el chat, que dependiendo del dispositivo que estén utilizando, encontrarán dicho chat ya sea al lado derecho o abajo de la pantalla de YouTube en su dispositivo. La conferencia, aunque rígida y estructurada dadas las diferencias culturales de México e India, tiene un toque especial por parte de la doctora Dharampal, dado que estará usando mayormente caricaturas políticas de la época para ilustrar y darnos mejor a entender los sucesos y eventos políticos y socioculturales de la época y relacionados directamente con el movimiento de independencia de la India. Permítanme presentarles a la conferencista, la profesora Gita Dharampal. La doctora Gita Dharampal es decana retirada del Departamento de Historia del Instituto de Asia Meridional de la Universidad de Heidelberg en Alemania y es desde noviembre de 2018 decana de investigación de la Gandhi Research Foundation en Jalgaon, Maharashtra. Habiendo obtenido su grado de licenciatura en la Universidad de Manchester y estudios en Cambridge, en Inglaterra, así como maestría en historia y doctorado enfocado a estudios de India en la Universidad Sorbonne Nouvelle en París, la doctora Dharampal fue posteriormente catedrática en la Universidad de Freiburg y en la Universidad de Regensburg en Alemania, profesora visitante en el Departamento de Historia de la Universidad de Stanford en Estados Unidos, profesora de Historia Moderna y Contemporánea en la Universidad de Augsburg, Alemania, y decana del Departamento de Historia en la Universidad de Heidelberg en Alemania. Sus publicaciones y focos de investigación abordan temas que abarcan desde las interacciones transculturales premodernas entre Europa y la India, la historia cultural marítima de la región del Océano Índico de los años 1400 a 1800, la historia médica, las transformaciones religiosas y rituales en la India de 1500 al año 2000, así como la historia sociocultural y política del periodo colonial en India, con énfasis especial en el movimiento resurgimiento político y cultural de Mahatma Gandhi. Dejo con ustedes a la doctora Dharampal con la conferencia Mahatma Gandhi, arquitecto de la libertad de India. Dr. Gita Dharampal, thank you for being with us tonight, so early in India. Thank you for your time and effort for this lecture. We usually say the floor is yours. I guess now we say the Zoom is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much. So I will zoom in. Good evening to everyone. And first and foremost, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Professor Venetia for his generous words, for his excellent introduction to our collaboration between CETYS and the Gandhi Research Foundation in Jalgaon. And I would like to thank the team, every member of the team for hosting me in such a professional and really cordial manner. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and fellow learners, thank you for joining us today as we embark on an exploration of one of history's most transformative figures, Mahatma Gandhi. Our topic, Mahatma Gandhi, the architect of India's freedom, will take us through the life, philosophy, and enduring legacy of a man whose ideas not only led India to independence, but also redefined the very essence of political resistance. Now, on January the 27th, year 2000, Vice President Krishna Kant released the Rashtrapita Mahatma Gandhi Bharat Map. This is a special 3 rupee commemorative postage stamp marking the 50th anniversary of the Indian Republic. This map of India, which you see on the screen, with its minimalist yet powerful lines designed by the cartoonist Ranga, speaks volumes. It portrays how Gandhi's inspirational force shaped the nation, endowing it with its subcontinental contours. Gandhi is India, and India is Gandhi. This profound symbiosis symbolizes that Gandhi not only inspired the birth of the Indian nation, but also drew his inspiration from the Indian people, giving voice to their deepest aspirations. Gandhi's journey is not just the story of a leader, but the chronicle of a revolution that redefined what it means to resist. Indeed, it was a revolution that revolutionized revolution. With committed nonviolence, Gandhi stood against colonial oppression, injustice, and most importantly, against violence and hatred. His life is a lens through which we can understand the deeper currents of Indian society, the global struggle for freedom, and the universal quest for human dignity. Today, we will traverse the key moments of Gandhi's life, delve into his philosophical evolution, and examine his role in crafting a new method of political engagement, namely satyagraha, that forever changed the course of history. We will also explore the visual representations of Gandhi's struggle through historical and political cartoons, which provide a powerful commentary on the events that shaped his leadership and India's freedom movement. Next slide. To set the stage, the next slide. To set the stage, let's begin with a brief chronology of Gandhi's life, highlighting the crucial stages across his 8-decade journey that unfolded on 3 continents. We will look at his childhood and youth in India from 1869 to 1888, his legal studies in London from 1888 to 1891, his time in South Africa from 1893 to 1914, where he fought against racial discrimination, and finally from 1915 until his assassination in 1948 as the leader of the Indian independence movement. Now, a few words about his early life. Gandhi's journey as a revolutionary leader began long before he became the central figure in India's independence movement. Born in Porbandar in 1869, a coastal town in Western India, his early life was shaped by a rich cultural heritage and a deeply rooted sense of justice. His father's emphasis on truthfulness, justice, and integrity, combined with his mother's Hindu Vaishnavistic piety, which focused on compassion, self-sacrifice, and an inclination towards Hindu, Jain, and Muslim syncretism. All these core values profoundly influenced him. And these parental values, coupled with Gandhi's own intellectual curiosity, spirit of adventure, and unwavering willpower, enabled him to stand his ground during his legal studies in London from 1888 to 1891. This period was crucial in strengthening his cultural identity. That is, he became more consciously Indian. He didn't become a British man. He became more consciously Indian. And then on returning to India in 1891, Gandhi's adventurous spirit soon led him to accept a job as a legal advisor for a Muslim business firm in Durban, South Africa, where he arrived in May 1893. Now, the next slide. Upon arrival, Gandhi, aged 24, encountered the harsh realities of racial discrimination. The infamous incident at Pietermaritzburg station, where he was thrown off a train for refusing to move to a third-class compartment despite holding a first-class ticket, was a turning point in his life. This personal affront became the catalyst for his struggle against what he called the disease of color prejudice. Next slide. To lead the struggle against racism, Gandhi spent over 2 decades in South Africa, where he developed and refined his philosophy of satyagraha, or truth force. Satyagraha was based on the principle that nonviolent resistance is the most powerful weapon available to oppressed people in their quest for justice. It was not passive resistance, but an active, courageous engagement in civil disobedience where the practitioner willingly accepted suffering without retaliation. Then we move on a little. In 1906, Gandhi, aged 37, launched his first mass protest against the Asiatic Registration Act, or Black Act as it was called, a law requiring all Indians to register, give fingerprints, and carry identification passes, which represented a blatant form of racial discrimination. Gandhi's response was to organize a mass refusal to comply with the law. thereby instilling self-confidence and a sense of dignified self-respect into the previously submissive Indian immigrants, uniting them into a determined community against governmental injustice as reflected in this cartoon. Next slide. The cartoon is entitled Passive Resistance in the Transvaal, the Steamroller versus the Elephant, with the caption, "The elephant," that is the Indian community under Gandhi's leadership, sat tight, and the steamroller exploded. To explain, as Gandhi's Satyagraha campaign gained momentum, it became clear that the united, stubborn force of the Indian community, symbolized by an unyielding elephant, was more than a match for the governmental steamroller trying to crush it. Despite facing imprisonment and brutal repression, the Indian community in South Africa, under Gandhi's leadership, remained steadfast in their non-violent resistance. Next slide. And here you see the famous photo of Gandhi as a satyagrahi, a non-violent resistor that he had become through his experiences in South Africa, a man with a will of steel and an unswerving conscience committed to the welfare of his fellow Indians. Gandhi's efforts in South Africa culminated in the 1914 agreement, where the South African government conceded to many of the demands of the Indian community. This success solidified Gandhi's belief in the power of Satyagraha and set the stage for his return to India, where he would apply these principles on a much larger scale. Return to India and the rise of a revolutionary leader. Within a short time of his arrival, a dramatic change took place among the Indian people. This is a quote from a historical report. But how was this possible? How was this change possible? I would say that it was the case of the right man being at the right place at the right time, and with Satyagraha as the right tool. Let me elaborate. Upon his return to India on the 9th of January 1915, Gandhi, aged 46, found a colonized India yearning for a new path to freedom. The timing was perfect. During the First World War, Indian political developments had reached a standstill. Neither constitutional petitioning nor violent acts of terrorism had been able to command popular support, unite nationalist leaders, or mitigate imperial policies. Gandhi's strategy of satyagraha applied to concrete issues such as landlord oppression in Champaran, the textile workers' grievances in Ahmedabad, exorbitant land revenue in Kera in 1918, unjust punitive state legislation through the Rowlatt Act in 1919. All these campaigns, and especially the last mentioned, mobilized the masses into a pan-Indian movement against socio-political injustice and violence, and welded them together in a nationalist struggle challenging British colonial authority. Thus, the Congress Party, which hitherto was just a kind of westernized elite debating club, was transformed by 1920 under Gandhi's leadership into a national movement. But it should also be emphasized that Gandhi's strategy of nonviolent resistance succeeded because it resonated with deeply embedded cultural values such as ahimsa, nonviolence, satya, truth, swadharma, righteous duty, sarvodaya, welfare for all, tapas, willpower, and yajna, sacrifice, and was supported by his sincere personal commitment for the oppressed masses. Central to all these values were a forceful definition of courage, a deep-seated belief in well-proven strategies of conflict resolution, which were reinforced by an unswerving dedication to the welfare of the poor and to the concomitant regeneration of community structures. All these features transformed Gandhi into a foremost leader of the Indian freedom movement to achieve Hindu-Muslim unity, the removal of untouchability, the promotion of self-reliance through Swadeshi, and all this was through the implementation of satyagraha, the force of nonviolence, the force of truth. During these years, Gandhi also championed social reforms in sanitation, education, women's empowerment, and the upliftment of the poor. He founded the Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad, which became a living model of his ideals, a self-reliant community where everyone contributed to the common good, regardless of caste or social status. And then at this juncture, a watershed event occurred. Next slide. No, the slide doesn't change it. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre in April 1919, where colonial troops under General Dyer killed hundreds of unarmed Indian civilians, marking a turning point in India's struggle against British rule. The brutality of the massacre convinced Gandhi that complete non-cooperation with the British government was the only way forward. So in 1920, Gandhi launched what we call the non-cooperation movement, the non-cooperation with the British government, joined by the Muslim Khilafat movement, calling for Indians, Muslims, and Hindus alike to boycott British goods, institutions, and honors. And this was a bold and unprecedented step, urging the entire nation to withdraw its support from the colonial administration. The movement spread rapidly, with millions participating in protests, strikes, and boycotts of foreign goods. Next slide, please. The esteem with which Gandhi as a national figure was held even in the foreign media is paradigmatically encapsulated in this German cartoon from the satirical magazine Kladderadatsch, which was published in Berlin during the 30s. However, the non-cooperation movement was not just about resisting British rule. It was also about building Indian self-reliance. Gandhi promoted the idea of Swadeshi, encouraging Indians to produce their own goods and boycott British imports, especially textiles. The spinning wheel, or charka, became the symbol of this movement, producing khadi, that is hand-spun and hand-woven cloth, representing self-sufficiency and resistance to British economic exploitation. However, after the violent Chauri Chaura incident in February 1922, where protesters clashed with police, resulting in the deaths of 22 policemen, Gandhi called off the non-cooperation movement. This decision underscored Gandhi's unwavering commitment to violence, even at the movement's peak. And he received a lot of criticism for this. But this commitment to nonviolence, his own commitment to nonviolence, is brought out with poignant force in Gandhi's own words. It's a short quote. Let me read it for you. Let it be remembered that violence is the keystone of the government edifice. Since violence is its sheet anchor and its final refuge, it has rendered itself almost immune from violence on our side by having prepared itself to frustrate all violent effort by the people. We therefore cooperate with the government in the most active manner when we resort to violence. Any violence on our part must be a token of our stupidity, ignorance, and impotent rage. To exercise restraint under the gravest provocation is the truest mark of soldiership. The veriest tyro, that is the novice in the art of war, knows that he must avoid the ambushes of his adversary, and every provocation is a dangerous ambush into which we must resolutely refuse to walk. Gandhi's logical and forceful reasoning on the necessity of nonviolence reveals a leader who was not passive, but astutely aware of the power dynamics at play. He saw violence as a trap set by the colonial government, one that would only reinforce their power. By exercising restraint under the gravest provocation, Gandhi believed the Indian people could demonstrate true courage and avoid falling into the enemy's ambush or trap. And interestingly, Gandhi often employed military terminology to describe his own approach to nonviolence. And ironically, he considered himself a man, an icon of nonviolence, to be a general of an army of nonviolent satyagrahis, demanding strict discipline and order from his followers, who received rigorous training in his ashram, which functioned in many ways like military camps. Next slide. That Gandhi's martial representation also impressed the international media is apparent from the images projected to draw attention, in particular to his symbolically dramatic salt march in 1930, defying the British monopoly on salt production and its imposition of a salt tax, which symbolized the economic exploitation of India. Gandhi chose salt as the focal point of his protest because it was a basic necessity of life, and the tax on it affected every Indian, rich or poor. His defiant civil disobedience march is paradigmatically depicted in this Czech cartoon entitled Gandhi Goes to War, in which Gandhi, with his non-violent army of 78 freedom fighters, is shown as resolutely defying the armed might of the British Empire. In this almost surrealistic portrayal, it is above all the disciplined nature of the campaign that is highlighted. Not only was Gandhi able to arouse and galvanize a whole nation by his about 390-kilometer march from Ahmedabad to the coastal village of Dandi, culminating in his defiant act of making salt from the seawater, but also through his uncanny talent for attracting the international media. The global public became a spectator as colonial repressive violence was borne courageously even after Gandhi was imprisoned. And this is conveyed with awe-inspiring effect in an American cartoon entitled The Ghost Walks in India, that appeared in the Post-Dispatch of St. Louis, which shows Gandhi's ghost of non-violent resistance with subcontinental contours stalking India and weighing heavily on Britain's conscience. In short, through Gandhi's Satyagraha campaigns, the legitimacy of the British Raj was being demolished, which underscores Gandhi's forceful impact, political impact. The Salt March was indeed a masterstroke of political symbolism. It was not just a protest against the salt tax, but a broader challenge to British authority in India. It demonstrated the power of mass mobilization and non-violent resistance. The global media coverage of the event brought international attention to India's struggle for independence, and Gandhi emerged as a symbol of resistance against colonialism worldwide. Political cartoons from this era often depicted Gandhi as a frail figure, but wielding immense moral authority, confronting the British Empire with nothing more than his walking stick and a pinch of salt. These images captured the David and Goliath nature of Gandhi's struggle, emphasizing the power of nonviolence in the face of overwhelming force. And following the Salt March, the British government invited Gandhi to London to participate in the Second Roundtable Conference in 1931. This was a crucial moment in India's freedom struggle, yet Gandhi was the sole representative of the Indian National Congress, and the British were unwilling to concede to Indian demands for full independence to a united India. Despite this disappointing setback, Gandhi's participation in the conference was significant in bringing international attention to the Indian cause. His presence in London, clad in his simple dhoti and shawl, contrasted sharply with the formality of the British officials, symbolizing the stark differences between the colonizer and the colonized. Yet upon his return to India after the unsuccessful Roundtable Conference, Gandhi resumed the civil disobedience movement, encouraging Indians to continue their nonviolent resistance against British rule. The movement saw widespread participation across the country, with people defying British laws, boycotting British goods, and refusing to pay taxes. The British responded with mass arrests, including that of Gandhi, but the movement had already succeeded in awakening a new sense of national consciousness among Indians. Next slide. That the British authorities were at a loss as to how to deal with this opponent and his popular charisma is poignantly apparent in this cartoon by the renowned Indian cartoonist Shankar, entitled Lord Willingdon's Dilemma. For even when Gandhi was behind bars, imprisoned in Yeravda jail by Viceroy Lord Willingdon, the latter is confronted with an even greater challenge. For with key in hand, he turns round and discovers to his utter dismay that for the one Gandhi locked in, there are thousands outside. The nation had become galvanized through Gandhi's leadership, and there was no holding back, leaving the colonial hierarchy paralyzed. However, admiration for Gandhi's achievements was often also tinged with a sense of incredulity or disbelief. Next slide. For instance, that Gandhi's incredible political, next slide please, that Gandhi's incredible political stature made such an impact on the European public, but was also received with amazement in the Western media, is rendered explicit by this cartoon entitled The Shirted and the Shirtless by J.C. Hill of the Auckland Star from New Zealand. As you see, it depicts a parade of leaders of the various political movements in the world around 1933, associated with wearing shirts of various colors. And as well-informed global citizens, you might be able to identify them. Well, let's start with the obvious ones. The black shirt worn by the Italian fascist Benito Mussolini, the brown shirt by the Nazi Adolf Hitler, the American dollar shirt by President Roosevelt, the green shirt of the IRA under Eamon de Valera, the red shirt, communist Joseph Stalin, the slump shirt with the bowler hat representing Britain in the Depression under Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald, and almost hidden at the front of the parade, the Chinese blue shirt under Chiang Kai-shek. All these world leaders have their gaze transfixed, looking aghast at a bare-chested, a shirtless Gandhi seated cross-legged on a pedestal, and with great incredulity, they exclaim, and he ain't wearing any blooming shirt at all. This is New Zealand slang. Their implicit interrogation could be framed as follows. How is it possible that Gandhi, a man of fragile build and not being a proponent of any political ideology, not wearing any shirt, could exercise such global influence, or at least attract such global attention? Perhaps you have an answer. Let's take this up in the discussion. As you know, Gandhi's determination and resilience were tested repeatedly. He was imprisoned multiple times and his campaigns faced setbacks, but he never wavered in his commitment to nonviolence and truth. His ability to unite people of different religions, castes, and regions under a common cause was unparalleled. And Gandhi's leadership style was not just about giving commands, but about inspiring others to take ownership of the struggle for freedom. Next slide. And this became explicit in the Quit India movement of 1948, which was another pivotal moment in India's freedom struggle. The movement, launched at the height of the World War II, demanded an end to British rule in India. Gandhi's call to do or die resonated with millions of Indians who took to the streets in protest. The British responded with brutal repression, arresting Gandhi and thousands of other leaders. Despite the failure of the Quit India movement to achieve its immediate objectives, it succeeded in uniting Indians across the country in the demand for independence. Indeed, the movement marked the beginning of the end of British rule in India, as it became clear that the British could no longer govern India without Indian consent. Next slide. And while Gandhi's efforts were primarily focused on securing India's independence, his vision for the nation extended far beyond the end of British rule. Gandhi envisioned an India rooted in self-reliance, social equality, and moral integrity, as was exemplified in Sevagram, his last ashram in the center of India. He believed that true freedom would come only when India addressed its internal social issues, such as caste discrimination, communalism, and economic inequality. Gandhi's advocacy for the upliftment of the untouchables, whom he called Harijans, or children of God, was a significant aspect of his social reform agenda. The Harijan Sevak Sangh, or the organization for the service of the Harijans, he sought to eradicate untouchability and integrate the Harijans into the mainstream of Indian society. This was a radical stance at a time when caste divisions were deeply entrenched in Indian society. And through the Gandhi Seva Sangh, his aim was to regenerate rural India. So, moreover, Gandhi's concept of Sarvodaya, that means the welfare of all, was a call for a society where the benefits of progress would be shared by everyone, not just a privileged few. He advocated village-level self-sufficiency, decentralized governments, and sustainable development. Gandhi believed that the strength of India lay in its villages and that the development of rural areas was key to the nation's progress. In 1946, Gandhi was to describe his vision for independent India's polity as follows. The quote is given on the screen. In this structure, the political structure composed of innumerable villages, there will be ever widening, never ascending circles. Life will not be a pyramid with the apex sustained by the bottom, but it will be an oceanic circle whose center will be the individual in the villages. And the diagram below visualizes this political structure of a Sarvodaya society, a society that focuses on the welfare of all. Gandhi's vision also included communal harmony between Hindus and Muslims. And as you know, he was deeply disturbed by the growing tensions between the two communities of Hindus and Muslims and worked tirelessly to bridge the divide. Next slide. His efforts, however, were met with resistance, and the partition of India in 1947, which he opposed, remains one of the most tragic chapters in the history of the Indian subcontinent. And you see Gandhi, the danger signal that Gandhi is giving, with Gandhi attempting to halt the derailment of the Indian subcontinent. Gandhi's commitment to nonviolence and his attempts to stop the communal violence during the partition ultimately led to his assassination on January the 30th, 1948, by Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist who opposed Gandhi's efforts to promote Hindu-Muslim unity. Gandhi's assassination was a devastating blow to India and the world, yet his legacy endures not only in India, but globally. Next slide. So this American cartoon from the Chicago Sun-Times, dated May 1968, was published a month after the assassination of another world leader, the civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, who was greatly influenced by Gandhi's nonviolence. The cartoon portrays Gandhi seated on the ground, exclaiming to Martin Luther King, "The odd thing about assassins, Dr. King, is that they think they've killed you, but your legacy lives on." Let me conclude briefly. Gandhi's leadership was characterized by his unwavering commitment to nonviolence, his ability to mobilize masses, and his emphasis on self-discipline and moral integrity. His approach was not merely political, but deeply ethical and spiritual, drawing from diverse cultural and religious traditions. Gandhi's influence extended beyond India. His principles inspired civil rights movements worldwide, including Martin Luther King Jr.'s struggle for racial equality in the United States, and Nelson Mandela's fight against apartheid in South Africa. And more details about this in my subsequent talk. To sum up, Gandhi's role as the architect of India's freedom was pivotal, but Swaraj, or self-rule, as he envisaged it, has still to be attained, as I shall explain in my subsequent talk. Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance not only led to the liberation of India, but also provided a powerful tool for oppressed people worldwide to challenge injustice and seek dignity and rights. His ideas continue to resonate in contemporary movements advocating for social and environmental justice, human rights, and peace. In closing, let us remember Gandhi's words, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." These words encapsulate the essence and the contemporary relevance of Gandhi's life and work, a call to action for each of us to strive for truth, justice, and peace in our lives and in the world around us. Thank you for your attention. I hope the next slide, I hope this talk has provided you with some valuable insights into Gandhi's life and his revolutionary contribution to India's independence and beyond. Thank you. The last slide had a namaste sign. Perhaps not there. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dharampal. We have a few questions, some questions from the participants, the audience in this conference, in this lecture. One of those questions relates to your thoughts and from your perspective, which would be Gandhi's greatest legacy and contribution today?
That's a very crucial question, a pivotal question. And I think, I mean, as I've tried to explain in my talk, I think his main contribution is this strategy of using nonviolence in resolving conflicts, because that also involves not just the use of nonviolence, but respecting the opponent. You don't hate the opponent, you realize that the opponent is also caught up in a system which is in generating violence. And I think if we understand this, if we try to negotiate with the opponents, we can reach some kind of compromise that we can use non-violence rather than resorting to violence that just leads to more violence. He said that an eye for an eye will just make the world blind, the whole world blind. And this is what is happening in the world at the moment in the various conflicts of Ukraine and Russia, and Israel and Gaza. So I think there, if Gandhi's perspective and his practice would be applied, I think that would be his crucial contribution to the contemporary world.
Thank you. Another question relates to Gandhiji's birthday, October 2nd. The audience would like to hear from you. How is Gandhiji's birthday celebrated every year in India? Which type of activities, which type of events are there?
Yes, well, firstly, the 2nd of October and the 30th of January are both considered as Memorial Days. The 2nd of October is a holiday, is a state holiday in India, and it has also been named the Day of Nonviolence, International Day of Nonviolence by the United Nations. So since it's a holiday, all the offices in India are closed, and schools and academic institutions, they have speeches, keynote speeches. Somebody like me will be invited then to give a talk. There may be a procession through the town center. There would also be children doing various things. Maybe some of them dress up as little Gandhis. There would be an effort to put into practice some of the sort of social reform that Gandhi was trying to do. And so it's generally a day, a Memorial Day, which is a holiday for everybody, but with institutions organizing various events to commemorate the contribution of this great man.
Thank you. One of the cartoons that you showed us related to the Salt March of 1930.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about this Salt March? What happened during those months, and how did this impact the Indian independence movement?
Yes, this is also a very important question, and the Salt March was really the focus, was one of the pivotal moments of the independence struggle. And Gandhi had been thinking about the issue of salt taxation for several decades. While he was in London, he wrote an article in the Vegetarian Society Journal about the injustice of having this salt tax, that it was something that affected the poor most. So Gandhi was wanting to choose something, focus on an issue that would unite the whole nation, and in opposition to the British, not to the British themselves, but to the British colonial system. And this salt represented this because it affected everybody. It was a basic need, and the salt tax affected the poor most. And this salt march, he had to be well planned. It was really excellently well planned. Anything that Gandhi did was really strategically planned. The route for the Salt March was especially going through the rural areas. So it took about, I mentioned, about almost 400 kilometers. It could have been done in a much shorter time. I mean, maybe a shorter route of about 200 or so, 220 kilometers, he would have reached his destination. But he wanted to go through the villages. He had his 78 associates, satyagrahis, who were specially chosen. They represented all spheres of society. And when they went through the villages, he wanted to have discussions about how to regenerate Indian society, the rural Indian society. So there was an effort that was being made through talks and demonstrations to revive village industries, not just the charkha, but all the village industries that were being made, and to try and improve the living conditions of the villagers en route. Look at issues like sanitation, health, women's empowerment, education. All this was done by him staying for half a day or overnight and engaging with the people. And this is remembered by the people on the route. Since in the last few decades, this Dandi Salt March has been reenacted a number of times by Gandhians and politicians. People who the older members of the villages en route remember this salt march that would have happened during their childhood. So it was a means of regenerating, revitalizing Indian society, especially in the villages. And the salt march itself, he demonstrated that you could make your own salt by then taking a lump of salt from the sea, from the shore at Dandi, and this then set off a whole protest reaction throughout the country of people making their own salt, selling their own salt, which was considered illegal by the British government. And so the British government also reacted very violently. But there was no violent reaction from the protesters. Yes, I hope that has answered the question to a certain degree.
Thank you. Another question relates to Gandhiji's focus on impacting the economy and social life of the people and the villages. We know about his efforts to teach them how to weave their own clothes and their own textiles. Could you expand a little bit more on these facts and historical events?
Yes, there's also a very fundamental question. See, Gandhi had great admiration for Indian society, and he seemed to intuitively understand that the way the state in which rural India was in the 1930s and 40s was not what it had been, say, 150 years prior. He realized that the peasants were not just farmers. They were also craftsmen, that there was no such thing in pre-colonial India. That would be until about the late 18th century, 1780s or so, that every Indian had a skill. There was no such thing as unskilled labor. So this meant that there were all kinds of village industries that were taking place. I mean, the spinning and weaving of cotton, but then you have oil presses, you have even steel making. Steel and iron was being made in small furnaces. That in the 18th century, there are reports about this by Britishers who were just visiting, that the best steel that was available in the world around the late 18th century was being produced in India. Now, Gandhi, he didn't idealize the past, but he felt that the grassroots people, the ordinary peasants of India, needed to have more self-confidence. Their way of life, their living conditions had to be improved. I mean, they were so impoverished, and the sanitation was so bad. So one had to focus on that first, and then revive the village industries that had once existed. And he felt that India was a country, a nation of villages, and that if one wanted it to function properly, one must focus on the local grassroots economy. And he did not exclude the urban development, but he felt that India's rural economy was something very worthwhile. And I think we're recognizing this now, where we talk about localized economy, rather than having globalized economy. I mean, which was done after independence. Gandhi's principles were not followed by the post-independence government. I mean, the Nehruvian government emphasized big is beautiful. You had big dams, steel works, big IITs, that's institutes of technology. But the primary education, the agricultural economy was in a way neglected, and Gandhi was put on a pedestal as the Mahatma, and in a way, by putting him on this pedestal, he was paralyzed. His influence was mitigated, was reduced, and so his dynamic force that he had during his lifetime was in a way paralyzed. This happens. I think now, to a certain extent, one is realizing the importance of what Gandhi was saying in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, and its relevance today. And India, in a way, is blessed to have this, because in other parts of the world, one doesn't have this icon, and one doesn't have the village industries to the extent that they are in India. Of course, in India, the level is very rudimentary. It has to be they have to be regenerated, revitalized. One shouldn't go back to the past. They can be modernized. And Gandhi was also, he was a scientist in a way. He wanted to develop the most efficient charka, the most efficient spinning wheel. He issued a prize for this, a prize of 1 lakh, that's $100,000 rupees, which was quite a lot at that time, for a demonstration of a spinning wheel that was fast, that was secure. I mean, he wanted to improve the technology. He was not against technology, but technology should be controlled by man. Technology shouldn't control man. I think this gives a sort of, in essence, maybe something of what Gandhi represented.
It does. Thank you. Because of time constraints, this was the last question. We have come to the end of this lecture, of this conference, and we thank you dearly from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you, Professor Dharampal, for your very interesting and insightful information and conference, your thoughts and historical information, and the manner that you presented this lecture was very interesting to see the cartoons of that era. Thank you again. And to the participants, please join us October 2nd for the second and last lecture of this cycle of 2 lectures commemorating the 155 years of the birth of Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you again. We have come to the end of the conference.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. It was a pleasure and a privilege for me to be hosted by you. And I think this is a good start to our collaboration, the collaboration between CETYS and the Gandhi Research Foundation. And I hope that some of members from the audience may be interested to come and visit us in Jalgaon. It's a very special place, and the best time to come would be from October to about March. And we would like to host you, and we have various events. You can find out the details from our website, but also from Professor Venezia. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.